What is the worst vehicle that each car brand makes? That's what we're going to find out. Welcome to Car Corner, where we help you, the consumer, master the process of car buying and car ownership. I'm going to share the worst new vehicle that's made by every luxury car brand. Basically, the complete dud of the lineup that leaves you wondering what on earth were they thinking. But before getting into it, remember, if you enjoy and get value out of this video, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. So let's start this list off with Lexus. Now, Lexus is a brand that normally makes excellent vehicles. They're known for being extremely reliable, well made, and they generally offer very good value for the money. But unfortunately, there is one model in the Lexus lineup that's nowhere near up to par with the rest. And that model is the RZ 450e. The RZ, or the RZ, is an all-electric crossover, but unfortunately it's not a very good one. The driving range is only around 200 to 220 miles or 320 to 360 kilometers at best, which is pretty pathetic. It's not the fastest charging EV or the best performing, and the pricing is surprisingly high. Now, as with other Lexus models, I'm sure the reliability is going to be very strong, but in this case, I'm not sure whether that's enough of a reason to really consider it. This is one of those EVs where you can tell that it was a bit of a half-baked effort, and probably just a stepping stone to much better EVs that Lexus will introduce in the future. And next on the list, let's do the worst vehicle from Mercedes-Benz, and that vehicle is the EQB. I've criticized this one a few times in other videos. The EQB is an electric version of the GLB, a small crossover SUV. But like the RZ, it's just a bit too underwhelming and too overpriced. The range of the all-wheel drive version is only around 220 miles or 360 kilometers at best. It doesn't perform particularly well or is very comfortable. The interior is a bit on the cheap side for Mercedes. And as mentioned, the pricing is ridiculously high. When I tested one a while back, the price tag of my test car was nearly $80,000. And to be perfectly honest, it really didn't feel like a vehicle that was worth even half that much. Mercedes seems to be getting off to a rough start with their EVs. And with models like the EQB, I'm not too surprised to see why. And now let's move on to Cadillac. And the worst vehicle that Cadillac currently sells has to be the Escalade. Now, Cadillac has a number of mediocre models, but the Escalade is arguably more problematic than the rest. Compared to other Cadillac models that are at least moderately attainable, the Escalade is extremely expensive, and it has a problem with rapid depreciation, and the reliability is just not good. In addition to various electronic issues, GM has been having transmission problems and enormous issues with their V8 engines, with constant lifter problems that can sometimes cause early engine failure. It may be comfortable and luxurious and the most famous model that Cadillac sells, but there are just too many issues with it that GM really needs to sort out. And while we're on American brands, let's move to Lincoln. And the worst vehicle that Lincoln sells is the Aviator. The Aviator is a model that I've criticized many times before. It just has so many issues that leave you shaking your head. Constant reliability concerns and safety recalls. It's extremely overpriced, depreciates rapidly, and has too few redeeming qualities that make it worth considering. The last one that I tested was over $90,000, and I could not come up with a single reason why anybody would pay that much. I would strongly recommend just staying away from this one altogether. And now let's move over to Volvo, and the worst vehicle that Volvo currently sells is the S90 and the S60. Now, I had a hard time deciding between these two because they are both kind of equally irrelevant. Volvo has become an SUV company, and I can't really see why anybody would really buy one of their sedans in 2024. Compared to their rivals, they're just kind of underwhelming, overpriced, have spotty reliability, and they don't hold their value particularly well. Because Volvo has turned into an SUV brand and these two are such slow sellers, they're probably going to get rid of them very soon, so why should you even bother at this point? Another brand that I had a tough time choosing just one model for is the next one on the list, but ultimately it had to be the Land Rover Discovery. The Discovery is one of those models that you probably forgot even exists. With the much nicer Defender and Range Rover models dominating the spotlight, the Discovery has very little reason to exist anymore. Now, you can justifiably criticize the whole Land Rover lineup for having all kinds of quality and reliability issues, not to mention poor resale value and very high cost of repairs. But the Discovery's issues go well beyond that. It's just not a desirable SUV to buy in almost any way, which is why it deserves to be on this list. And next on the list, let's move over to Tesla. And the worst vehicle that Tesla currently sells is the Model X. Compared to the hot-selling Model Y and Model 3, the Model X is a bit of a dud. It is extremely overpriced and depreciates rapidly, which is why Tesla has slashed the pricing several times. It is unnecessarily complicated with useless features like those Falcon Wing doors, and because of that, it's also the most unreliable model in the lineup. I think that one was pretty self-explanatory, so moving on to the next luxury brand, we have Genesis. And the worst vehicle that Genesis currently makes is the GV60. Genesis has a lineup of very impressive vehicles, but the GV60 is the only one that falls short. The issue with the GV60 is that it's basically just a Hyundai Ioniq 5 that's 15 to 20 grand more expensive. Now, platform sharing is very common, but in this case, other than design, there is no significant difference between the Ioniq 5 and the GV60. They are the same size, have the same range, perform and feel the same, and even the interiors are just too similar. Clearly, very little effort was made in differentiating them, so I just can't see why you'd spend the extra money on the GV60, especially when you can buy an electric GV70, which is much better in every way. And now let's take a look at Audi, and the worst vehicle that Audi currently makes is the Q4 e-tron. The Q4 is another example of a ho-hum mediocre EV that I see very little reason to consider. The driving range is poor, the performance is nothing special, and the pricing is just too high. And like the other EVs mentioned, it will likely be replaced by far better EVs in the near future, making it obsolete and pointless. It's just not a very good EV, so don't bother wasting your money on it. And next up we have BMW, and the worst vehicle that BMW currently makes is the X1. Some might be surprised to see this one chosen, but there are many reasons for it. I found the redesigned X1 to be a major disappointment and a step backwards in almost every way. It is not especially great to drive. It has a clunky and jerky dual clutch automated manual transmission, which makes it especially unrefined and uncomfortable. The interior is a bit underwhelming and unintuitive, with too much reliance on a touchscreen with a strangely very small display. BMW just missed the mark on this one, and the X1 feels like a significant downgrade from the X3 or X5, both of which are so much better. Now, there are a few other luxury brands which admittedly I had a really tough time picking just one model for being the absolute worst. These brands include Infiniti, Maserati, and Jaguar. The problem with all three of these brands is that their entire lineups basically all have the same issues. Aside from maybe one or two exceptions, the entire lineups of these brands are just extremely underwhelming and really outdated. They're also known for having way too many reliability and quality issues. They're extremely expensive, and they also depreciate extremely rapidly. As mentioned, there may be one or two models from these brands that are worth considering, but for the most part, their entire lineups are just a complete mess and need a lot of major work. And then on the flip side, you have a couple of luxury brands that don't really have any models that stand out as being exceptionally bad. I would say that both Acura and Porsche fall into this category. One or two of their models may be a little bit worse than the rest, but for the most part, these two brands don't really make anything that's especially bad. So there you have it. Let me know what you thought of these choices, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. You can also take a look at my other videos by clicking these links over here. Make sure to follow me on Instagram, and if you need any additional car buying advice, recommendations, or help with getting a great deal on your next new car purchase, make sure to visit carhelpcan.com. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next time.